For 342 standard galactic cycles, the Xenological Research Institute prided itself on having the most comprehensive database of human behavioral patterns in the known universe. Their facility, a gleaming monument to over-engineered architecture and unnecessarily complex filing systems, housed exactly 2,487,931 documented cases of human responses to various stimuli. That number would have been 2,487,932, but someone had accidentally classified a particularly animated garden gnome as a human, and nobody had the clearance to delete records. The Institute's lead researcher, a crystalline being who communicated through precise frequencies of light and insisted on being addressed as Doctor, despite having 17 more impressive titles, had spent their entire career categorizing humans into neat little boxes. These boxes, metaphorically speaking, because actual boxes had been deemed too primitive in Cycle 247, contained everything from response type A173, human reaction to stepping on Lego bricks, to response type Z999, human behavior when told their favorite hot beverage dispensary is permanently closed. The Institute's central chamber buzzed with the usual activity of researchers updating their findings. Holographic displays showed countless graphs, charts, and that one picture of a cat that nobody could figure out how to remove from the system. The air was filled with the soft hum of quantum computers and the occasional frustrated chirp of an analyst discovering yet another human anomaly that refused to fit into their carefully crafted categories. Did you see the latest analysis on human sleep patterns? A junior researcher, whose species communicated through interpretive crystalline formations, asked their superior. They voluntarily deprive themselves of rest to watch moving pictures of other humans pretending to be different humans. The superior researcher, whose crystalline structure had developed the equivalent of stress fractures from dealing with human-related puzzles, merely shifted their molecular arrangement in what passed for their species' version of an eye roll. File it under deliberately counterproductive behaviors, entertainment subset. But the crown jewel of their research was the recently completed comprehensive analysis of human resilience factors. This massive study, spanning centuries, had categorized every known aspect of human persistence, stubbornness, and ability to survive against improbable odds. They had charts for everything: human resilience in the face of natural disasters, surprisingly high; human resilience when faced with technological failures, annoyingly innovative; and human resilience when told they couldn't do something, off the charts and possibly breaking several laws of physics. The researchers had even developed a predictive model that could, with 99.99% accuracy, determine how humans would react in any given situation. The 0.01% margin of error was attributed to what they labeled as the coffee variable. Humans before and after consuming their preferred morning beverage were essentially different species. On this particular day, as the facility hummed with self-importance and the quiet satisfaction of beings who thought they had everything figured out, a small alert appeared on one of the monitoring screens. It was such a tiny notification that it almost got lost among the thousands of others, right between human uses sandwich as pillow during transport vehicle journey and human attempts to pet clearly holographic animal. The alert simply read, "Anomaly detected. Human parental unit expressing displeasure at educational institution." The researcher who first noticed it merely added it to the standard parental involvement in educational matters category, subcategory minor disputes, subcategory probably nothing to worry about. After all, they had documented 47,283 similar cases, all of which followed predictable patterns of complaint, negotiation, and eventual resolution. How very wrong they were. The Institute's vast database, with all its elaborate classifications and predictions, had failed to account for one crucial factor: the exponential increase in human determination when it came to their offspring's well-being. Their algorithms, despite their complexity, had never encountered what was about to unfold, a force of nature that would make their previous understanding of human resilience look like a child's crayon drawing next to a galactic star map. As the day progressed, none of the researchers noticed that the small alert had begun to pulse with increasing frequency. None of them realized that their carefully constructed categories were about to become as useful as a chocolate teapot in a supernova, and absolutely none of them predicted that their entire understanding of human nature was about to be dramatically revised by one very determined parent with a grievance. The Institute's databanks hummed contentedly, blissfully unaware that they were about to witness something that would force them to create an entirely new category: response type Omega, when humans stop being polite and start getting real. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the universe was about to learn why you should never, ever underestimate a human parent with a cause. The Institute's greatest discovery was about to begin, and not a single one of their 2,487,931 documented cases had prepared them for what was coming. The trouble began, as most catastrophically entertaining events do, with a memo. Not just any memo, but one of those bureaucratically pristine documents that had been passed through so many approval channels it had practically achieved sentience. The memo, written in standard galactic script with 14 different authentication markers, detailed a rather mundane adjustment to the educational protocol at Intergalactic Learning Center 7249B. What the memo failed to consider, in all its meticulously crafted glory, was that humans don't particularly appreciate being told their children must undergo mandatory cognitive recalibration to better align with standardized galactic learning methodologies. The first sign that something was amiss came when the Institute's emotion detection arrays began registering unusual readings. The sensors, calibrated to measure everything from mild annoyance to thermonuclear fury, started displaying values that caused several junior researchers to develop stress-induced molecular instability. "These readings can't be correct," announced one researcher, their crystalline form flickering with concern. "According to these numbers, the human's emotional state is exceeding our established classification system by several orders of magnitude." The senior researcher floated over, their usually pristine geometric form showing signs of agitation. "Impossible. Our classification system was designed to account for every conceivable human emotional response, including that time they discovered someone had eaten the last donut in the break room." But the readings were correct, and they were getting worse. The parent in question had arrived at Learning Center 7249B exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds after receiving the memo. The center's security cameras captured what the researchers would later describe as a walking contradiction to all known laws of human behavioral physics. The footage showed a calm exterior that somehow radiated more menace than a supernova. The parent walked, not stormed, not charged, but walked, into the administrative office with the kind of deliberate purpose that made hardened security systems want to call in sick. The Institute's monitoring systems went into overdrive. Multiple departments began generating reports simultaneously. Department of Human Facial Expression Analysis, subject displaying what we categorize as a smile, but our algorithms suggest this is the same type of smile a black hole gives just before it devours a solar system. Department of Body Language Interpretation, subject's posture indicates either imminent diplomatic negotiation or prelude to total war. We are unable to determine which, and we're afraid to guess. Department of Vocal Pattern Recognition. The subject's voice maintains perfect politeness while somehow conveying all the warmth of an ice giant's core. We didn't even know that was possible. The parents' first words to the administrative AI were recorded, analyzed, and immediately classified as a new category of their own. "I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge of this new educational policy." The administrative AI, programmed with thousands of response protocols, made its first critical error. It attempted to explain that the policy was non-negotiable and implemented for optimal educational outcomes. The Institute's monitors recorded the parents' response, a single raised eyebrow that somehow managed to convey more threat than an entire armada of battle cruisers. What followed was a masterclass in human diplomatic terrorism. The parent systematically dismantled every argument, policy, and justification with the precision of a surgeon and the relentlessness of a quantum singularity. They cited regulations that even the policymakers had forgotten existed, referenced educational studies from 17 different star systems, and somehow managed to make filing a formal complaint sound like a declaration of war. The Institute's researchers watched in horrified fascination as their predictive models crashed one by one. The parents' behavior defied every category, subcategory, and sub-subcategory in their database. "They're using logic and emotional appeal simultaneously," one researcher exclaimed, their crystalline structure nearly shattering from the impossibility of it all. "That's not supposed to be possible." They just referenced Article 7249.3 of the Galactic Educational Standards, another researcher noted with growing panic. "Nobody reads those. We didn't even think humans knew they existed." The situation escalated when the parent pulled out what the researchers would later term the nuclear option, a detailed presentation, complete with holographic slides, showing exactly how the new policy violated no fewer than 37 interstellar educational rights agreements. The administrative AI attempted to engage its conflict resolution protocols, only to encounter what it would later describe as an unstoppable force of parental determination. The parents' argument was so thoroughly researched, so perfectly constructed, and delivered with such devastating politeness that the AI briefly considered retiring to become a waste management system. Meanwhile, back at the Institute, the chaos was spreading. The predictive modeling department had gone into full meltdown, with researchers frantically trying to create new categories to classify what they were witnessing. The behavioral analysis team had resorted to throwing their perfectly organized data tablets into the air and watching them crash, deciding this was somehow less stressful than trying to make sense of the situation. "Look at this!" shouted one researcher, their voice modulating through several octaves of panic. "They just presented a counter-proposal that's actually better than our original policy. How did they have time to write this? When did they sleep?" The answer, of course, was that they hadn't slept. The parent had spent the entire night crafting their response, powered by that mysterious human fuel known as righteous parental indignation, and what the Institute's chemical analysis team would later identify as concerning amounts of caffeine. The situation reached its climax when the parent, having systematically demolished every argument presented to them, calmly stated, "I've also taken the liberty of sharing this information with the other parents." Those words sent shockwaves through the Institute's monitoring systems. The phrase "other parents" triggered emergency protocols that hadn't been activated since the great coffee shortage of Cycle 279. The administrative AI, faced with the prospect of dealing with multiple similarly motivated parents, did what any rational artificial intelligence would do. It immediately revised the policy, approved the parents' counter-proposal, and may or may not have submitted its own resignation letter. The Institute's researchers watched in stunned silence as their centuries of carefully accumulated data on human resilience was effectively rendered obsolete by a single parent armed with nothing more than determination, extensive research, and enough caffeine to power a small city. The aftermath was both impressive and terrifying. The Learning Center's policy was not only changed, but improved. The administrative AI received counseling, and the Institute's researchers were left with the task of creating an entirely new wing dedicated to studying what they now termed the parent factor. As the dust settled, one junior researcher turned to their superior and asked, "Should we update our predictive models?" The superior researcher, their crystalline structure still showing signs of stress, replied, "Update them. We need to set them on fire and start over. And add a new warning label. All predictions become void in the presence of motivated parents." The incident would go down in the Institute's records as a turning point in their understanding of human nature. They had studied human resilience for centuries, documented their adaptability, and classified their determination. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared them for the unstoppable force of a parent armed with facts, fueled by principle, and powered by enough coffee to give a quantum computer the jitters. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the Institute's vast database, a new entry was created. Response type Omega Plus, when a human parent decides to do things the proper way. The description simply read, "May whatever deities you believe in have mercy on your soul." While the Institute was busy having its collective existential crisis, a far more intriguing chain of events was unfolding across the galactic communication networks. The parents' meticulously crafted presentation had gone viral, if by viral you mean spreading through bureaucratic channels with the surprising speed of a quantum-entangled cat video. Other parents, previously unaware of the policy changes, began accessing the shared information. The Institute's monitoring systems registered an unprecedented spike in what they termed collective parental awareness, a phenomenon that sent their threat assessment algorithms into a panic-induced shutdown. "The data is replicating," screamed one researcher, their crystalline structure vibrating at a frequency usually reserved for major astronomical disasters. "It's being shared through something called parent groups." The senior researcher's response was lost in the cacophony of alarms as their systems registered multiple instances of parents accessing educational regulations simultaneously. The sight of humans voluntarily reading bureaucratic documents sent several junior analysts into early molecular hibernation. What followed was a masterclass in coordinated human action that left the Institute's behavior prediction models in smoking ruins. Parents across 17 star systems began submitting identical requests for policy reviews, each one accompanied by the original presentation plus their own additions. It was like watching a bureaucratic avalanche in slow motion, if avalanches could cite legal precedents and attach strongly worded footnotes. The Institute's Parent Activity Monitoring Division, hastily established 3 hours ago, reported some disturbing trends. They're organizing themselves into committees. They're cross-referencing educational standards across multiple galaxies. Someone started a spreadsheet. The mention of a spreadsheet caused several senior researchers to immediately file for emergency leave. They had learned from previous incidents that when humans start organizing data into cells and columns, the situation had officially crossed into unstoppable force territory. But the real crisis came when the parents discovered something the Institute had overlooked, a subsection of an ancient educational treaty that technically classified their children as trans-dimensional knowledge seekers, entitled to educational rights that spanned multiple planes of existence. The administrative systems across various learning centers began experiencing what could only be described as digital panic attacks. AIs that had previously handled millions of complex calculations per second were now sending out distress signals that consisted entirely of mathematical symbols arranged into sad faces. One learning center's AI actually attempted to file for emotional compensation, citing extreme psychological distress caused by exposure to perfectly formatted regulatory citations delivered with devastating politeness. The Institute watched in horror as their carefully maintained observation protocols crumbled in the face of organized parental action. Their attempts to classify and categorize the ongoing events resulted in their main quantum computer displaying the error message, "Unable to process." Too many instances of reasonable arguments supported by proper documentation. The situation reached its peak when parents began scheduling meetings, not requesting, scheduling, with educational administrators across the galaxy. The level of organization was unprecedented. They had spreadsheets, action items, and somehow, impossibly, they had created a universal calendar that automatically adjusted for temporal variations across different space-time sectors. "How are they doing this?" demanded one researcher, their crystalline form showing stress fractures. "Our best quantum computers take years to synchronize multidimensional calendars." "They're using something called parent group chat," replied another researcher, their voice modulating through several octaves of disbelief. It's more efficient than our fastest quantum communication networks." The Institute's attempts to monitor and analyze the situation were further complicated by the parents' ability to operate on seemingly impossible amounts of caffeine while maintaining perfect documentation of every interaction. Their filing system was immaculate, their reference lists were flawless, and their ability to quote regulations verbatim was terrifying. One parent group had even created a presentation template that automatically generated perfectly formatted citations and regulatory references. The Institute's legal analysis department took one look at it and collectively decided to take a long vacation. The breaking point came when the parents discovered they could submit their concerns in triplicate to 3 different administrative levels simultaneously. The resulting bureaucratic chain reaction caused several administrative AIs to temporarily achieve consciousness just so they could experience the human emotion of despair. Meanwhile, the Institute's researchers watched in fascinated horror as their subjects demonstrated levels of organization that defied their understanding of human capabilities. They've created a shared database. They're using collaborative document editing in real time. Someone made an interactive flowchart. The mention of flowcharts caused the Institute's Strategic Analysis Department to officially give up and convert their office into a relaxation lounge, specializing in soothing geometric patterns. The parents' collective action had essentially created a new form of administrative warfare. They weren't just fighting the system, they were rebuilding it from the ground up, complete with color-coded sections and indexed appendices. Their weapon of choice? Impeccably formatted documents delivered with smiles that somehow managed to convey both perfect politeness and absolute determination. By the time the dust began to settle, the Institute's researchers had witnessed something unprecedented, a complete systemic override achieved through nothing more than perfectly legal means, flawless documentation, and the kind of determination that only coffee-fueled parents can muster. The Institute's emergency recording systems captured what would become known as the Declaration, a parent calmly stating to an administrative AI, "We've reviewed all the relevant regulations, prepared our responses, and organized our evidence. Shall we begin?" That single sentence, delivered with a smile that could freeze a sun, marked the moment when the Institute's understanding of human capabilities underwent a fundamental shift. They had witnessed the perfect storm, human parental instinct combined with organizational skills, powered by caffeine and focused through the lens of righteous determination. As one shell-shocked researcher noted in their final report of the day, "We thought we were studying human resilience. What we actually witnessed was human parents discovering spreadsheets and regulatory loopholes. May the universe have mercy on our administrative systems." The Institute's databases would never be the same. Neither would their coffee budget, which had been dramatically increased after researchers realized they needed to match their subjects' caffeine levels just to keep up with the documentation. In the weeks following what Institute researchers now referred to as the incident, always capitalized, often whispered, the facility underwent some rather dramatic changes. The most notable was the complete redesign of their classification system, which now included a bright red warning label. All predictions subject to complete invalidation by determined parents. The once pristine central chamber, with its formally organized displays and methodical categorizations, now resembled something closer to a quantum physics experiment gone wrong. Holographic displays flickered with constant updates as researchers frantically revised centuries of assumptions. The infamous cat picture somehow had multiplied and now appeared on every third screen, a fitting metaphor for their inability to contain and classify human behavior. "Have you seen the latest data analysis?" asked a senior researcher, their crystalline structure showing distinct signs of what humans would call a nervous twitch. "We've had to create 17 new categories just to account for different types of parental determination." Their colleague, whose form had developed a permanent asymmetry from stress, projected a weary frequency. "Did you get to the part about the coffee correlation?" "You mean how the parent's effectiveness increased exponentially with each cup?" "Yes. We've had to develop entirely new mathematics to describe it." The Institute's prestigious, comprehensive analysis of human resilience factors had been essentially rewritten. The new version included chapters with titles like "Why Your Data Means Nothing, A Study in Parental Motivation," and "Coffee, the Real Source of Human Power." The Behavioral Prediction Department had been temporarily converted into a meditation space, as the researchers there needed somewhere to cope with the fundamental breakdown of everything they thought they knew. The walls were lined with motivational posters featuring quotes like, "Sometimes the best prediction is no prediction," and "It's okay to not know things." Perhaps the most significant change was the creation of a new emergency protocol. Any time the words parent, education, and policy appeared in the same sentence, alarms would sound, and researchers would immediately enter crisis mode. This included activating what they called the preparedness measures, which mainly involved backing up all data and having therapeutic crystal harmonization sessions on standby. The administrative AI at Learning Center 7249B had not only recovered, but had developed a new appreciation for human complexity. It had started a support group for other AIs dealing with human parents, which met regularly to share stories and coping strategies. Their most popular session was titled, "How to Recognize When a Human Parent is About to Destroy Your Entire Protocol System with Logic and Love." As for the parents' counter-proposal, it had been so successful that it was being implemented across multiple learning centers. The irony of this outcome was not lost on the researchers. Their subjects had essentially become the teachers. One particularly insightful junior researcher compiled what became known as the New Understanding, a list of revised principles about human nature. All previous data about human resilience must be multiplied by a factor of 1,000 when offspring are involved. The combination of parental love, caffeine, and righteous indignation creates a force that defies quantification. Never assume you have classified all possible human responses. The quieter the human becomes, the more dangerous they are. A parent armed with research is more powerful than any weapon in known space. The Institute's final report on the incident concluded with a statement that would be engraved, in very small letters, on the wall of their main entrance. In our quest to understand human resilience, we forgot the most fundamental truth. Never underestimate a species that will spend all night preparing a presentation just to ensure their children get the education they deserve. We thought we were studying them, but perhaps they were teaching us all along. The last official amendment to their research protocols was a simple but crucial addition, a large red button labeled Parent Override that, when pressed, automatically invalidated all previous assumptions and initiated what they called the Just Accept It and Adapt protocol. As the Institute settled into its new normal, researchers began to approach their work with considerably more humility. The question was no longer, how resilient are humans, but rather, how much coffee do they have access to, and are any of their children involved? The infamous cat picture, still stubbornly present in their systems, had somehow acquired a new caption that perfectly summarized their new understanding. Like this image in our database, some things about humans will never be fully explained, and that's okay. In the end, the Xenological Research Institute learned its most valuable lesson. Sometimes the most accurate scientific conclusion is simply, well, we didn't see that coming. They had studied human resilience for centuries, but nothing had prepared them for what one angry parent could do. And perhaps that was exactly the point. The final entry in their database, added by an anonymous researcher, simply read, Conclusion. Humans remain classified under handle with care, with the subcategory, especially if they have kids. Further research pending, from a safe distance. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, a parent was enjoying a well-deserved cup of coffee, blissfully unaware that they had just rewritten the book on human resilience. Or perhaps they knew exactly what they had done. After all, that's what parents do best, changing the universe, one carefully researched presentation at a time.